Oh, you can do it, Adam. You can do it.
You going to dance, Adam?
Nice work.
And listeners, I am walking on sunshine because who's in the guest room tonight? None other than Adam Voigt and Tracey Ezard. How are you both?
Yeah, really good. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carrie.
Oh, and Thrive Studio tonight is continuing our series on education, and it's come out of all the adapting, flexible movements, pivoting that we've done in the last few months. And education is a topic that everyone has an opinion on, and we all want the very best for our next generation. So it's a passion for not only Adam and Tracey, but myself, but all of you outside in the big wide world who are listening. So you're very welcome. We do have a chat. So Harvest Home Primary School says, great to be here. Thank you very much. Well done.
I know that music.
So I feel a little bit burdened tonight, and listeners, I'm going to tell you why. When I read these bios for Adam and Tracey, I just went, oh, crikeys, I've walked Kokoda and I just felt exhausted. I thought, where have they been able to do all this in their career? And it's through their passion and commitment and desire to learn, I am sure. So if you don't mind, I'm going to give you a little potted bio for both of them if you don't know of them. Many of you listening will know of their reputation. So, and I need to read it, all right? So you're going to forgive me right up. So I'll use all my devices and show you how clever I am. Right. So let's start. Tracey, I'm going to go with the beautiful, the bold and the beautiful. So I think we'll go that way. So Tracey, I just love your ferocious warmth leadership that you have been using and are using in your approach to collaborative culture work in learning communities in our schools. You have a huge reputation. You have an amazing amount of trust for your innovative work that you do across Australia. You are an author of 2 sensational little books. Yes, The Buzz, and the other one is, help me, the glue. And we're going to talk about the glue tonight, because we're talking about a possible new frontier for education. So what's the glue? What's the buzz from both of you? Because I know that you've been in and active, down and dirty with your learning communities today, this week, over the last few months, and will continue to do that because that's your life work. You've worked across Australia and in New Zealand. You've been presenting at conferences well known with many educational luminaries such as John Haddie, Michael Fullen, Carol Dweck, Lynn Sharratt. And look, I don't want to do any more because I probably am going to muck it up. So listeners. And these 2, by the way, who we've got with us tonight are partners in crime in lots of ways. They are colleagues, they are thought leaders together, they are optimists but also troubleshooters and problem solvers. And they dream of what can be better. So with that, I'm going to introduce Adam. So welcome, Adam. You're stuck in the middle of 2 roses tonight, so you're very welcome.
Happy to be here.
So many of you will know Adam from Channel 10, The Project. You're the education expert, and you've had an amazing career, a very young principal, setting up your own school in the Northern Territory. You've been a TED Talk, so that's one of my goals at TED Talk. You've been local and internationally involved in developing school cultures. You're very, very passionate about restorative practices, and your latest book that is out, is all around restorative circles and culture, the emotional intelligence that we need and how we're going to put that all together, and gaining back respect, reputation for what teachers do in their day-to-day work. So how am I going? Is that all right?
Yeah, I reckon that'll do as well.
Okay, so let's get on. Let's get on and have a chat. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you tonight. So our first question, and because we've got three heads, I need to behave myself and not move around. I'm one of those movers. So here we go. So let's start now and talk about what is the next frontier for school education. And if we're talking leadership and we're talking school cultures and how we collaborate, how are we going to know, I suppose, that our students are getting the absolute best outcomes from the education they're receiving? So I'm just going to open it up, and whoever wants to go first, off you go.
Well, I don't mind. I do the culture thing all the time, but I actually think that I think it's time that we actually got really intentional and explicit around culture. I often, when I'm speaking to educators, I often sort of begin presentations by asking, put your hand up if you think that the culture of a school is important, and everyone says yes. Everyone puts their hand up, yes. And then I make a bit of a gag out of getting one person in the audience to come out to say, well, can you come out the front then and tell everyone what the correct definition of school culture is? And a lot of hands go down. And so the point of that is that if we all agree that school culture and the culture of any learning organisation is incredibly important, but we don't know what it is, how do we work on it? So if you're not clear about that, then you're struggling as a starting point. So I think that a decent working definition of culture is that it's a sum total of behaviours. It's all the behaviours contributed by all the stakeholders. I think within that, you've got behaviours that are encourageable, with the things that we say we love that, do more of that. That's part of our values. That's what we stand for. And then there are behaviours that we tolerate that exist in our culture because we haven't perhaps found the skill or the will or the time to be able to tackle them with a repeated methodology. Learning organisations for me that succeed are not the ones that don't have any tolerable behaviours. We're people. We make mistakes. We grew up in school. You've got several hundred young people whose brains aren't finished out. Good luck if you want to have no behaviours that are a problem.
That's true. Yeah.
But it's organisations that have decided what's our method for dealing with that. How do we handle that? And so the work that we talk about at real schools and using restorative practices is saying choose that as your method and get consistent about that, build at that, build capacity at that, and then you're capable of building a culture that will give you, the objectives and the successes you're looking for.
Well, schools are asked to nearly teach everything these days. More and more and more. So a loaded curriculum can often take away from the intensity of the core learning. So what about you, Tracey?
Look, I am with Adam all the way on that. And the focus I think we've just got to really always bring it back to is connection. And, we know culture is about connection, and it's how do we connect our students together, but how do we also connect our communities? And, my big focus of the work I do is how do we connect all our team together? So, the professionals working within a school work bloody hard. There's no doubt about it. And, they've been incredibly amazing in these last 5 months. But I think that when we have a culture that is deeply about students, but it's also deeply about learning. It's a learning culture, not just in the classrooms, not just out in the yards or whatever, but our people all come together to learn deeply. That's when we really start getting that traction. So when you say, Carrie, what about schools for the future? The schools that have got a thriving learning culture where they're deeply connected, there's strong levels of professional trust, but also very strong levels of trust within the kids. Everyone knows what's expected. Then we can start to really push around innovation and about moving out of this one size fits all that seems to be, our system is stuck in. I get to work with schools that are just, their innovation is amazing. The work they're doing together, the collaboration, the co-creation they're doing together is phenomenal. And I just think we need to just let them go and let the professionals who know what they're doing fly with it.
Well, that's been one of the things that keeps coming up, that the schools during the social isolation and having to deliver their teaching via digital means, working with parents at home, or that whatever we call it, there's quite a few names. One of the things that keeps coming up is it's the autonomy that schools felt in being able to make decisions at the local level And I would hope that that's something that we pay attention to, that we don't lose.
I think that schools that have seized that autonomy and chosen to use that autonomy to focus on the right priorities are the ones that are coming out of this really well, and that will continue to come out of it, not in survival mode, but they'll come back into that innovative kind of mode. So I think we had schools that potentially got obsessed the first time around, in particular, got a bit obsessed with content delivery. Now, I know that myself, I spoke to a principal one day and he said, I thought we were all prepared for online learning. I said, really? And he said, yeah, we've worked out how the kids can get all the worksheets, everything's done.
Okay. Okay.
And they had, kids who were switched off, kids who weren't showing up. I think my favourite was a kid who renamed himself Reconnecting ... and turned his video off. So the teacher would think that he was just having tech issues, but he was gone.
If you've got an imagination like that, it tells me that you're not being stretched.
So I think schools that said we're going to actually do the very best we can with this environment to maintain that connection that Tracey's talking about. The teachers that went and did tours of their house with their kids on iPads, introduced their dog in the backyard, and then had their kids write a narrative about what happens when Buster the dog gets out that gate for the day. What does he get up to in that day? I reckon that's brilliant.
Absolutely.
A learning organisation that's leveraging connection, and we've got to deprivatise and cultivate all of those ideas.
And if you think about, what are we there for in education? It's about creating learning. This is, good old Alvin Toffler, years ago, the futurist said, the literate of the 21st century, learn, unlearn, relearn. We have been lived experience around this. And so it's I think there's been a whole lot of great stuff that's happened in every school around people collaborating more, learning from each other more. How do we really ensure that this is the best time for our students in the diet context? We've got such challenges around mental health, around connection, around, but there's also been some kids that have thrived as well. And so being able to have those conversations about what do we want to bring forward, what do we actually want to break away from, they're the conversations that are happening more and more. And I think it is exciting in the challenge. It's that silver lining that says we've got some great opportunity to break some stuff that's just hasn't been working for us for a long time.
So what's interesting about families talking about the way their own children have been reacting. And I was was speaking with somebody today, and they were just telling me about their two children, quite different. One you would probably at a glance say, you're the extrovert, here's the other introvert. What happened for them was they actually swapped roles. The extrovert found that they wanted more time. They were really exploring, did all these experiments. So it doesn't actually ring true, what people are saying. It's about the learning task, isn't it? It's about and what other resiliency skills they've got for the situations. And across all this, we've got a lot of inequity. There's not every student has access all the time. So that is one of the things I think that I totally admire about a lot of our teachers, is that they're very aware of the socioeconomic group of background of the students, the accessibility they have, and how they've made it possible for them to still learn and enjoy the learning when they didn't perhaps have access to the online all the time. I know there's plenty of schools that did parcels, drop-offs and various things, or pickups and various things like that. And you would hear, both of you would hear some amazing stories. I've got a question around thriving and unlearning. And if you think about that, everyone thinks, well, thriving's very romantic. It's always happy. It's always full of energy, blah, blah, blah. But for me, thriving is getting into any situation and making the best of it. And looking back at how you've managed other situations, what resources you've got to pull in, who you contact, all that sort of stuff. So for me, thriving is how you still get out of bed each day. How do we get these kids to the classroom each day? And then this notion of unlearning. So talk to me a little bit about how you see that, because you both use unlearning, the word unlearn, and you're talking about collaborative cultures, and you're also talking about those relational and resiliency skills that we need, not just our students to have developed, but also our teachers and our leaders. So that's that community, and our parents, of course, are included in that. They're big stakeholders as well.
Yeah, I think on the learning, I think that this has been the great experiment. I think in finding out what it was that we didn't need to make learning happen. So, and I think probably the biggest unlearning that schools at a grassroots individual school sort of level have found is that you actually don't need a teacher standing at the front of the room in an authoritarian position for learning to happen. So there are implications there for online because we've had to take it into an online environment. And so if we don't have that great 200-year-old tradition of a teacher standing in front of an Australian classroom, what does learning look like then? And they've reimagined that. And as Tracey said, they've been remarkable. I've been in awe of what every individual school has done almost on its own to do that. But there are also implications for when we go back. So if it's now true, we've proven it, that you don't need to be in that position, what should it be when everyone comes back to the classroom because of some of those lessons learned? So the thriving piece for me, Carrie, I've asked, I've had like 50 teachers on a Zoom meeting and asked them, put your hand up if you've got a kid who has unexpectedly thrived in the remote learning environment.
Yep.
And every hand goes up. And we've talked about what's that about. And so I guess where I've sort of concluded on that is that it's the absence of comparison. So in a classroom, what we know is that if a kid, let's say a kid who normally struggles, a teacher can look them in the eye when they do well and go, mate, that is fantastic. I love what you've done there. You've tried so hard and made so much progress. Awesome. And then, which is the right thing to say, but then turn around and that kid will look at the kid next to them who did it quicker and the kid next to them who did it better and immediately conclude that 2 out of 3 means I'm stupid.
Yeah, the story they tell themselves, yeah. Okay.
Kids in that sense of shame and embarrassment and humiliation about themselves as learners don't learn well the next time the opportunity comes. But all of a sudden in the remote learning environment, they don't have that.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's the lesson for us then in going back? How do we create conditions where kids feel less of that shame, more of that achievement? How do we have to pivot on our language around, encouraging progress rather than the passing of benchmarks or the passing of tests?
Yeah.
There are all sorts of lessons there for us about how we can get young people to thrive as a result of running this dirty big experiment.
Yeah. And I'm just, Tracey, before you just jump in there, listeners, you need to know that both Tracey and Adam are in Melbourne. So our colleagues in Melbourne are back in various levels of lockdown again. And so, yes, a little bit different here in New South Wales, but nonetheless, not, this is not unimportant. This is crucial. Yeah.
And I suppose I would put a word of warning out to other states around this, that, some schools have been able to go, right, what we did, we learnt the lessons, we got feedback about what worked, what didn't work, we tweaked, and we've got our plan ready to go. Others, not so much. We're focusing on let's go back and got caught short when we had to go back to remote. So I think these conversations are so important to have. And, some of the things around the unlearning piece, I've been encouraging the crew that I work with is to just have these conversations, have light conversations as a culture, with the students. Students have got so much great voice to tap into. But what were the assumptions we used to have?
Yeah.
So what did we assume before? So we assumed that Johnny was disengaged, that wasn't interested in learning. Wow, Johnny's really shown us that he actually is. We've got to give him the right environment. So there's been all these great assumptions that I've just been saying, people just capture it, do a Toffler wall, an Alvin Toffler wall. What were your assumptions? What have you found? So what have you unlearned around that? And then what are you relearning? And it's not relearn, but relearning, because learning that leads to the thriving you're talking about, Carrie. It's how do we step into this space where we are always iterating what we do, depending on the impact we're getting. And, one of our colleagues, Dr. Paige Williams, she's actually today launched a new book called Becoming Anti-Fragile. And anti-fragile is a great term. That's
great.
Yeah.
I'm just going to write that down. Yep. Anti-fragile.
Called Anti-Fragile. And, Paige, she is part of the Melbourne Uni Graduate School of Education and Positive Psych crew. And she's written this great book. And it's all about how do we step into that space of it's not just about resilience, because it's actually more. It's being able to be, I always imagine anti-fragile standing in the wind. You're being buffeted by all this stuff, but instead with resilience, I reckon what we're doing is we're going, no, I'm pushing back. But with anti-fragile, you're going, bring it on, come on, because this is what we thrive for. So I think that's what we're trying to create in our kids, because the world is so challenging. But
so you lean into it. You lean into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, lean in.
Like, think of the people that, you know, I love talking to people that are going, there's so much in this time that I'm learning about myself, about the community. And even though so much of it sucks, there's great stuff going on. To me, that's a real anti-fragile approach to the world, and that thriving approach.
Oh, I really like that. I think we need to share some resources on that as well. That would be fantastic. Well,
that's what for me the buzz is too. You know, the buzz is when we thrive around that pushing, shoving, this bit of discomfort. It's not comfortable. It's not mediocrity. It's pushing to say what can we do even better. Yeah.
Well, we could even say that it's going to put a different take on to assessment as well, the way that we've actually structured assessment.
Yeah. And thereby, how do we define success in our schools? Is it just passing a certain benchmark that was designed for some other median student that doesn't exist? Or can we get right into, and this is, I think, a lesson not only for schools but for any organisation, can we get thoroughly obsessed with growth and progress?
And
whilst you're just sitting, just answering there, you've got your fan club working, because Julia Steele says two of my favourite experts, Charters Tower State School, our favourite people, Adam and Tracey. So
they're some of our favourite people.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Proud. So good to see. So good to see. Something around the assessment stuff. Like there's great. You know, and there are people far more skilled at this area, so I don't want to say at all I'm an expert in this, but what I love is the conversations now around, let's get out of just looking at this small box of what we assess kids on, and let's start looking at learner profiles. Let's start looking at the characteristics of learning, because once you've got anyone in the world that is an avid learner, they're going to be able to thrive wherever you drop them. So how do we get out of this really small container that we have around NAPLAN results, around ATAR, and actually start creating this environment in this education where kids are able to build those skills, you know, the collaboration, the complex problem solving, and look at whether we're making an impact as educators on that stuff.
It's such a fascinating philosophical sort of field to start to step into, isn't it? What we're actually saying is we're no longer as interested in what kids have learned as we are in how good they are at learning.
And do you know, you've just taken me back to a board of studies before NESA, before whatever, the Institute of Teachers. It was the Board of Studies New South Wales, and I was an independent parent representative many years ago, and with a number of amazing people. But I was on the primary curriculum committee as well, so we all had these subcommittees. The first thing we had to do to introduce ourselves was actually talk about our philosophy for learning. Now, I'm a mum of 4, so at that time all my children were at school, various ages, and so I got to actually share what I had. And I, you know, first time in a political situation, right, and being an advocate for independent parents at the time. And I just went, this is going to be interesting. How much do I declare? And I thought, you know what? You have to be real. You have to be genuine. So declare what you want for your children. What happened was that everybody around that incredibly huge board table down in Clarence Street said something very similar. And we all talked about the social and emotional skills, learning how to collaborate, how I learn, how to work with personalities, know myself and others, and how I can have a disagreement, how I can make friendships. Then came learning about gold, frogs, and Captain Cook, or Lieutenant James Cook, right? So in those days, so it tells you how old I am. But it was, even back then, we all had a particular philosophy of what we actually wanted the kids to do, and it wasn't an overloaded curriculum. It wasn't about being... We talked about basics. We talked about numeracy and literacy basics, basically, and this love of learning. So there you go. We're still on task.
I don't think it takes away from the specialisation that we also need. You know, we need our specialists. Absolutely, we need our kids to be able to become scientists and, these people that really need very particular skills. But if everyone has those sort of learning skills, no matter what you do, then you're going to be continuing to win, in whatever you decide to do. Whether you want to go, the school I work with today, most of their kids will go on to a trade. That's the environment that they're in. And it's not that is just as important. We need our trades. But having trades people that are able to come up with new ideas, be a bit entrepreneurial about running a business, have got the literacy for sure, but can actually apply things in a real complex environment that our world is now. That's what I think that's the frontier of education.
Well, there's more and more. Sorry, Adam.
I think if we can seek that simplicity in the complexity, that clarity of focus. I know that when in our partnerships, when I meet with parents, and I often begin with an exercise where we ask there are so many things you could hold a school responsible for these days. You hear every time there's any sort of societal issue, the glib and easy catchphrase of education's the answer comes up and cram it into the school program. But you ask parents, is one thing that I think it hasn't changed in schools in the last 50 years. You ask parents, what do you really want? And I often ask parents, if you're only allowed two things, what do you want? And the first one always comes back to what Tracey was talking about. We want schools to be houses of learning, where they not only learn some useful stuff, but they become good at learning. And then the second part is that what I call citizen building.
Yes.
I still think that parents 50 years ago wanted this.
Yes.
I still think that parents today want to send their kids to school in the hope that the school will work in partnership with them to turn their kids into decent young people. That's it. And that's what we want to, as schools. I think when we say that we're going to take on everything and try to fix everything, then we become experts at nothing. I think that that's also contributed to some challenges that we've had around respect for teachers and regard for teachers in the community that desperately needs to be addressed. And so I think it's about saying, well, what are we experts at? We're experts at turning kids into great learners and great citizens. That's what we're real good at. We stand really strongly in that.
Well, I was going to actually move towards our teachers and how they're feeling. And we've got a whole lot of anecdotal information. We've got a whole lot of research being done at the same time. From those you've been in close contact with many teachers. What are you getting the feeling about how they are feeling about their profession through this particular time?
Well, I've been working with a special school in Victoria just last week, and out of all of Victoria, special schools are the only ones that are still having kids turn up.
Every day.
And every day, and the staff are turning up every day. And for many of them, I take my hat off to their resilience around this, because they are feeling undervalued and they're feeling dispensable. And yet they, in their heart of hearts, want to do their best for their kids too. So many of them are struggling, and yet within that cohort you will also find people that are just they're stoic and they're getting on with it. Most people are doing that, and I find in Victoria anyway that this second time around is a bit heavier for people. So that's around the COVID stuff, but that's what I'm finding, that people are still thriving in a lot of ways, but there's still just it's a little bit harder this time.
Because there becomes a level, doesn't it, where you can your resiliency skills work to quite good effect, and then things just start to pressure down. So this second a wave, I suppose, if we're calling it a wave, I'm not sure if it's been officially coined that at the moment, but the second time that we've battened down the hatches, there's a lot of feeling there of well, we were hopeful that this was going to be over. Right? We were hopeful. There was a bit of research I read out of McKinsey just recently. It was only a very, very small study, and it was based on interviews of people all around the world in a number of countries. And two of the results that came up were people in India felt joy during the first COVID. They felt more joy than other countries, and people in Australia felt more anticipation. And I looked at that and I thought, that's because we didn't have for the first time these massive number of cases, and then really increasing numbers of deaths each day. We didn't have that. We were buffered from it, but now that's actually happening here. So I'd be interested to see if that comes around. And our teachers are really, they're like action research, aren't they? They're providing us with so much information. Yeah.
I think there was a first time around of a grand adventure around the whole thing. We're actually, we're going to run a bit of action research. We're going to find some stuff out here, aren't we? And then, and I think that because there was that little sense of anticipation or that grand adventure, stakeholders were reasonably well invested. The kids and the parents really wanted to make it work the first time.
Yeah.
And the second time around in Victoria, at least, I think that I've spoken to a lot of parents and teachers who have said, well, the parents are kind of switching off a bit now, and so the parents have been quite overt about it. So I'm not doing it. It's too hard. I'm exhausted every day. I need to drink wine at 11 in the morning. I can't do it. And I think what people are then saying was, well, what's that all about? Yeah. And I think it is because we felt the pressure first time around to make learning, it was like a race to try and keep up with the learning that would have been occurring in the classroom. And I think we're realising this time that our responsibility is to look after people.
Yeah.
It's the mental health, it's the well-being. It's like Tracey keeps saying, the connection that we need to sustain here, and we need to put time into it. And to do that, we need to say all this stuff about how many worksheets you get done, how many spelling words you learn, how many points you got, what tests you passed. That just needs to go. The kids will catch up. There will not be a generation of kids wandering around with stupid tattooed on their forehead because they were educated in the corona age. It's not going to happen. No. The time for teachers to catch up on that will come. Yeah. And when it comes, like Tracey's saying, we've got to trust them. We've got to say, over to you. You're good at this.
Yeah. And sorry, Carrie, I was just going to say what I've talking to the teachers as well, and it's a trickle effect. So, if all teachers have either got their own class or they've got all their subjects, that they might, in a secondary school, they might have hundreds of kids that they're dealing with. That's a lot of connection to carry. That's a lot of kids that are struggling. Now, take that then up to the leaders.
Yep.
They're keeping it out for their community, for their kids, for their teachers. And then, I've often been saying to principals lately, don't worry about that thing around fix your oxygen mask. It's absolutely self-care. But actually, they've been the oxygen. They've just been pumping it out to people. So, people are just tired and, often haven't had a good break. So it's great. Julia mentioned before in the chat, schools are doing things like Wellbeing Wednesday where the kids are not on Flexible Friday. The school I was with today, Harvest Home, they're starting Flexible Fridays. So that there's this sense that we need to fill up, we've got to fill that cup, and we've got to be able to fill to each other. Otherwise, we're not going to be good to anyone.
And not feel guilty about it.
No, it's absolutely legitimate to do all of that stuff. I know a teacher that does, the same theme, Tracey, of Funny Thursday, where she shows the kids a funny clip on a Thursday that, some cat falling off a ladder or something. Yeah. And then that becomes what they're going to write about the next day. But I know another teacher that does town hall meetings on a Thursday afternoon when school's finished for the parents. So it's a Zoom link, it's half an hour. And she just comes, if you've got anything on your mind, if you're worried about something, it's not compulsory, but if you want to come and talk, I'll give you all the answers I can. And so, because it's just that connection and well-being and mental health this time round. And if that, obviously we hope and pray it doesn't happen in other states, but if it does, I think that the lesson that they'll take out of what has happened in Victoria is that it's people first this time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are some of the things that you've actually been seeing? So we've just moved right into that and sharing some of those ideas, and all our listeners, I'm sure, will have particular things that are happening at their schools. It's the line up along the streets when the teachers, someone's retiring, or all that is still happening. And I was working with a leadership team just last week, and they said what they've actually missed are those big community events that brought everybody together, you know, the grandparents, the parents, the kids, the teachers, and the planning for that. And they've said, but we want to reclaim some of that back. So it's, you know, how will we do it differently, but we can still do it. Yeah. So, you know, they haven't lost it. It's just that they've just now got to look at it and go, this is what we can do. Yeah. And here's the benefit. So there's a whole lot of community building still going on. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of great, you know, feedback from parents who do virtual assemblies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Parent-teacher interviews where you're face-to-face. Like, I think there's great benefit sometimes by being able to have this conversation between camera. I call it professional intimacy. You know, that in actual fact, in some ways, if we're being really mindful about our conversations, we can come here. And I've had a lot of feedback of people saying, we really feel a lot more connected as well. And look, Andrew has just posted on there, and I know this from firsthand looking at, this is from Harvest Home. Andrew's from Harvest Home, and he heads up the wellbeing there. And he and his team got on and put all these great videos up on the website, all these great activities for people to do to be able to take the way they do their positive wellbeing at school and transfer it home. And they called them local heroes, and gave real skill building to the parents on how they could actually do that to get their kids sitting down and doing the work or whatever. And just great innovation and just great thinking about how can we all be in this together.
Well, it's the whole village, and the way I brought my kids up, the way I looked at it was the whole village, and I never expected the school to do everything because I was passionate about my job, my role, and then I would always say to the kids, hey, the school you're going to will not be able to give you everything you need, and you can't just take everything that you want. So you have to be able to give back. So that notion of contribution, that citizenship that you were talking about before, I think is really critical. I might just ask you, Adam, tell us a little bit about the restorative circles and the notion of that, because I think it's really powerful. We're in a time when we've got a whole lot of pent-up emotions, people not quite being certain. They've had major change, so that's just bristling against all our values, our normalcy, our status, the way we see ourselves, our sense of certainty and all that sort of thing. But I'm interested in the restorative circles as well that are in your latest book. So would you give us a little bit of that? And Tracey, you pop in any time, because I know that there was a discussion about what you named the book. I know you two have worked together so well.
So the book's called Restoring Teaching, and it's with the two big intentions. One is to restore the status of our teachers by allowing them to reclaim their own expertise as, you know, being awesome at fostering great learners and building awesome citizens for the future. And then secondly, using this approach called restorative practices. And part of that is saying, can we challenge the notion of the way that our architecture must be in a classroom? So there's an awesome, one of my favourite scenes in movies comes from the American movie Dodgeball, where the coach, he's Patches Houlihan at the start, says if you can dodge a ball, and just starts throwing spanners. So I throw wrenches at teachers sometimes about what we're accepting in the classroom just because we've always done it.
Okay.
So I encourage them to teach wherever possible by getting a more of a circular architecture to their classroom, because it eliminates special spots. It takes them out of a powerful position. It sends a really clear message to your kids that we're doing education together and that I'm not doing it to you. Mm-hmm. So for primary teachers, I say, can you just stop clumping the kids together on the floor all the time? And they say, well, why? And I say, because there's special spots. And I ask, where are the kids sitting who most want to answer a question?
Yep.
And they're sitting front and centre at the teacher's feet. And I said, where are the kids sitting who most need to answer a question? And they're at the back and they're at the edges and they're rolling away. Yeah. And as a teacher, when we stand in front of a clump or sit higher up above the kids in that dynamic, we send a message to the kids that it's my job to control your behaviour, because I'm the authoritarian in the room. So self-regulation's gone for a start. The kids have no responsibility to do things like that. Then I throw wrenches at secondary teachers as well and say, why do you walk into a classroom and teach the kids sitting in rows and then walk out and complain that that 9B was a battle. Of course they were. Your classroom looks like a battlefield. It's designed for one
That's
person
right.
trying to force learning upon you, and for a bunch of teenagers to resist.
Yeah.
And so it's about saying, I know that we've done a lot of that stuff because it's been habit, but what if we broke that habit? What if we broke that chain? What would we do then if we decided that we didn't need to practice the way that teachers did 200 years ago? And so the circle stuff is about saying, can we show teachers 5 circle types that fit almost every need that you'll come across in the classroom, a handful of 5 circle principles that underpin success, ease, and can we get our teachers going home at the end of every day with lower stress levels because they behaved in a way that was in accordance with what they believe?
Yeah.
And also, can we have them going home feeling really effective because they got more done? And so that's one of the big ambition behind the book.
Oh, I think that's really very valuable. I spent a fair bit of time reading through your book, so I thank you for that. And I just, as I'm listening to you here explain it, I was just thinking about your ferocious leadership, Tracey, and how that works so well with the notion of reclaiming the role of teaching and learning, not the teacher and the learner.
No.
That's 2 separate things. I think there's a distinction there. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and look, when I was a teacher, my favourite place to be was on the floor with the kids.
Yeah,
that's what I loved, and so when I do a lot of leadership work with leaders, and it's about building professional learning cultures in schools, and Ferocious Warmth Leadership is all about how do we connect heads and hearts together. Because we've in a lot of areas of education, we've gone very, very cognitive. It's all about logic. It's all about evidence-based. It's all about data. And that's all really super important. But what about the stuff that connects us through our heart? What about the stories? What about the metaphors? What about the reason? And so one of the things I love about Adam's book is it helps us as educators, I reckon, connect to why we started doing what we love. And so for me, Ferocious Warmth leaders actually do that too. They sit in the middle. It's a bit of an infinity symbol. They sit in the middle and they pull from ferocity and they pull from warmth, because if we don't continue to push and transform and really create education that fits what our kids need, we're not being ferocious enough about our purpose. And if we do it by just booting people, if we do it by stomping on people, then we end up killing people, either through mental health or through burnout or just, low morale. So great leaders. And so great to see a couple of certainly my Ferocious Warmth exemplars on here tonight, and I'm writing about them in the book. But they are able, even though it's tough, to draw from both and go, I stand centered here about what I'm trying to achieve. And I'm working with my people collaboratively to get there. So, there is a lot of synergy, I think, between what Adam and I do in our
it's evident. Yeah, it's evident. So it's no wonder that you bumped into each other during your lifetime, I think. Yeah. Well,
I think that what Trace is talking about there is like a levelling up of a really simple point that Trace knows I talk about all the time, that the best teacher you ever had, you would remember that person as being firm and fair.
Yes.
And so I think this Ferocious Warmth, the reason that I really love this concept that Tracy's working so diligently on now, is it kind of it makes that really simple concept that can kind of that cognitive concept that Tracy's talking about, a heart concept. It's like, come on, this is the good stuff. And let's get explicit about it. Let's get intentional about it.
And we've got plenty of examples.
Something that's proven to be true for just
So we need to make sure that everybody knows what the great examples are, because we're very prone to the pessimistic view or the critical view, and not necessarily, come on, this is all about learning. It's putting a little step forward, maybe taking 2 back at this point in time, but going again and you get it. You know, it's fantastic. Look, we're coming to a close. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I'm really so thrilled with the interaction tonight. So it's a lovely accolade for both of you. Not that I think you need pumping up in any way, because you're very confident in the work that you do and what you do. But it's lovely to see that the community does acknowledge your influence. My last sort of thought is, you know, if we look down the road in, say, another 2 years, have you got any thoughts about what our education system might look like, or what it might look like at the coalface? What do you think the possibilities are?
Got some ideas about what it should look like.
Yeah, good. Should's good.
I actually think that 2-year time frame, Carrie, is not a bad one to think about, because I think what's happened is that everybody, you know, particularly parents, have had a peek behind the curtain. They've seen what it is. Right, this is what teaching's all about. And I want to be really clear to parents watching today. A completely different kettle of fish teaching your own kids than it is teaching 25 kids who are not yours. You know, there are some inherent challenges about being in the home trying to teach your own kids that make it, that are really, really hard. But I think what they have seen is just that little glimpse of what teachers really do. And so I think that it is incredibly important that if we do have a short period where people have got remembering what teaching is all about, and they've got a little bit more trust, a little bit more respect for what teachers and what school leaders do, I think it's so important that we leverage that now. So when we get the opportunity to get everyone back, we've got to say what needs to change. So what have we, and it gets back to where we started this conversation, I think, you know, what did we learn from the experiment? Even around some of that stuff about how to remove comparison where we possibly can, focus on progress, but also what did we miss? Yeah, when everyone wasn't there, what did we go, I just need that. And that's that human connection, that heart connection, that ability to build a little tribe, a little community in every single classroom around Australia, where every learner feels like they belong in that place. So for me, what I would love to see is for schools to be free to get the autonomy to focus intentionally in a highly supported way to build cultures, to build places where every stakeholder in that community feels like they belong and that they're special and that they're part of that system.
Yeah, I love it. And I would add probably a couple of things that I would love to see is I would love to see government listen more to our principals and our teachers and get out of where they live and go and see the great stuff going on. So that's a really big piece. You know, we've got to have more connection between policies being written and the people actually know what they're doing, having more of a voice and not having a battle to have that voice. And the other thing is, I reckon here's the opportunity to really break open so much stuck stuff around our curriculum and getting kids innovative approaches to getting kids engaged in really deep conceptual learning. There are many schools that are going down that track, and gee, there's some great stuff happening and really transforming kids' lives and kids' future because education looks different for them. So I think they're the real things I have to.
Well, we're not all the same. We are, and thank heavens we are not all the same. We're all unique, and our learning is critical to us and what we leave behind us. So I'm going to say thank you so much for your input tonight. If anyone would like to contact either of you, you have very strong profiles on LinkedIn. You have websites that are under your names. If there's something else you would like them to contact you with, over to you. Give your books a plug. Do whatever you'd like to do in the last minute.
After you, Si.
Oh, cool. Well, here are my 2 books at the moment and the third one on the way.
Yes.
The Buzz. I'm happy to, I've got these ebooks. These have been out for a while. I send them out to whoever wants to have them. You can have hard copies from my website. This one's about the glue of trust. We were talking about glue before. The glue of trust and glue of collaboration. And it goes beyond education just to really great collaborative cultures. But look, if anyone wants to contact me for resources or whatever, have a chat, always love to do that and connect up.
Thank you for connecting with me. It was an absolute privilege. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
Okay,
just looking
Adam.
around. I haven't got a book to grab, but they're around somewhere. But, yeah, so there was one over there on the wall. There it is. They're over the shoulder there. You can see that there.
I've got it somewhere.
So Restoring Teaching, yeah, that's available now. You can get it from heading to the Real Schools website, so realschools.com.au. You can also get it from my website at adamvoigt.com.au. Probably if people want to know more about what we do with schools, having a good surfer on the Real Schools website and our partnership options around school culture, around teacher wellbeing, around beginning teachers, and around the Real Schools Academy that we've launched as well, which is full of 6-week intensive courses to help teachers who are new to the profession, because we keep losing too many good ones.
Yes.
So if anybody's keen on checking that out, then please do. And all the contact details are available there on the web, and they'll be able to have a yarn with us about that.
Brilliant, brilliant. And listeners, thank you so much for your time tonight. We've had a great time. If you'd like to know more about my work, easy to find, Carrie Benedet, Benedet. Thriving Matters is what I'm all about, and this has been Education Matters, the new frontier for education. What's it going to be like? And we've had great input tonight from Adam Voigt and Tracey Ezard. Thank you so much for your time. Over to you guys. This will be on Facebook, on my Thriving Matters Facebook page. That's enough. We've had enough. It's time for a rest. Okay. Signing out. And as we go, I'll just play what it is that we need. Yeah. Oh. Walking on sunshine. See you guys. Thanks, Maurizio.
See you.
Bye, everyone.